When there are times of uncertainty, that voters do tend to stick more to the status quo. So that probably does play into the favour of the current government.
Nicki Hutley, welcome back to Dukascopy TV. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Always good to be here.
Thank you so much. Okay, now, despite the fact I'm being on the other side of the world, we're actually going to kick things off with Brexit. And I think the first question really is, how did we get it so wrong?
Look, I think it's interesting. Obviously, the polls were always quite close, and when they did go apart, it seemed to be that it was stronger for the Leave case. And I think you've got to always understand that polls have a margin of error, and I think we probably put too much emphasis on that close result and probably didn't understand that margin of error, perhaps didn't really understand on the day how weather might have affected the turnout and just how the turnout might be affected by different age groups, for example. So I think we didn't necessarily get it that wrong because the vote was still very, very close, as the polls suggested. They just suggested the other way, and maybe those who thought that the Remain was a strong case thought that it was stronger than the average person in the street did.
So let's take a look then about how this does impact domestically here in Australia. Now, Treasurer Scott Morrison has said that Australia is well placed for a Brexit, yet KPMG analysts have said that this could shave some growth off of the Australian economy. Where do we lie with this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, there's been an awful lot of analysis come out, both in the year up to the vote, and also obviously more immediately. I think the thing we take from this is we don't really know how it is going to play out. We don't know what's going to be negotiated. What we do know, that, and what we're seeing now, though, is a huge amount of volatility and uncertainty, and that's not good for growth. It's not good for what happens in the UK, and we know that Australia actually has very strong ties, not necessarily with direct exports, but in terms of direct foreign investment, both to and from the UK, that has a big impact, and that's a strong part of the economy. So that is going to have an adverse impact on Australian investors or UK investors into Australia. In terms of our growth, it's probably more about what that global uncertainty looks like. You've seen the reaction on those markets. Everyone's saying, what does it mean? And that's not a good thing for investment decisions. And what does Australian growth need most? It needs strong business investment. So it may be only at the margins an impact on Australian growth, but probably there will be a little bit of a negative. Are we well placed? Well, not as strong as we were post-GFC, because we don't have those big budget surpluses anymore to use fiscal policy to stimulate the economy.
The event is also quite timely, obviously leading into Australia's own federal election. We've seen the Conservatives edge ahead somewhat in the shadow of Brexit. Again, is that what domestically voters are going to be looking for as well, that kind of strength of leadership that perhaps they've seen falling apart over in the UK?
Well, look, strength of leadership, I think we've seen on both sides of politics here. There's been an awful lot of revolving chairs. But what we do know is when there are times of uncertainty, that voters do tend to stick more to the status quo. So that probably does play into the favour of the current government, and will make it harder for the opposition to get ahead. I think, is either party better placed to deal with any potential fallout? Not really. The policies are, by and large, not particularly different. Both want to, keep the economy strong. Both want to get towards a budget surplus, but over time. I don't really think it makes much difference, but I do think probably the voter in the street says, keep what you've got. It's a little bit safer.
Now, one of my favourite stories that has come out of this, and perhaps a lighter note to finish on, is now the possible call for an Oz exit from the Commonwealth. We've seen the UK leave the EU, so now whether or not Australia can leave the Commonwealth, is this just pie in the sky, perhaps slightly hopeful Republican thinking?
Look, I'm a Republican, I'll have to confess, but I think it is actually more hopeful thinking. I mean, we've had a referendum, and I don't think that certainly not the Conservative side of politics here is not keen to go down that path again, despite the fact that Malcolm Turnbull did used to lead the Republican movement. I think that that's a long way off, and I think as with the unfolding of what Brexit means, we've got to declare Article 50 first. This is a long time off, and so I think but a republic for Australia is even further off, sadly.
Nicki, thank you so much for your insight today.
You're very welcome.
Nicki Hutley there giving us her insight into Brexit and what it means all the way over here in the Australian market. That's all we've got time for right now. I'll be back with plenty more exclusive interviews right here from the heart of the APAC region. Goodbye.